Hello, YouTube world. I am back with another video. Um, more astrological information, I should say. Just on, first of all, happy Jupiter's Day. It's Thursday. Um, I was feeling very hopeful. And so, despite feeling a bit under the weather, I was like, you know what? I am going to make a video today on the planet of Mercury. Yesterday, we had the planet of Mercury. Currently, right now, Mercury is in the sign of Aquarius, square Uranus in the sign of Taurus. And so, as you know, I love to share about literal astrology and things that happen to you in real life time. So, I wanted to share my story, but I'll save it for the end. I just wanted to go over a couple of things and some things I'm thinking about, or I think that I've just been contemplating when it comes to Mercury. In an earlier video I made, I talked about how I was going to keep my eyes on Mercury this year. I think Mercury is, for me and my personal natal chart, is going to be quite active. And aside from it starting out the year, squaring Uranus and just doing all sorts of things, I think in January, I'm not sure of all the astrology for January, but definitely for February, Mercury is, you know, from what I could see and some of the research I did, is going to be doing a couple of interesting transits in February. So, Mercury squaring Uranus yesterday was what I consider sort of like the kickoff for me with Mercury this year. I think Mercury in the sign of Aquarius squaring Uranus in the sign of Taurus, a very grounded earth sign, definitely brought about unexpected change. And sometimes I think, we have to think more small frame when it comes to change. I think sometimes when we think of like the planet of Uranus, so many people think, oh my God, like what major groundbreaking thing is going to happen? And I think, it's not always like that. Yes, I think Mercury is, or Uranus is a very um, unpredictable type energy, sort of chaotic, especially when you don't know it's coming. I think that's what makes it a little chaotic, but it has the power to really just sort of rearrange things for you. It could be things dealing with your mind, or, in the sign of Taurus, think more physical, right? Think more tangible, your resources. Okay. So I'll get into that story later, my literal story of Mercury squaring Uranus in my own personal natal chart. But I definitely think it is it, you know, it's 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 a planet that just makes you think outside the box. Okay, is how I'll put it. And Mercury is already about thinking, so with the two together, um, it made for an interesting time, and I'm pretty sure collectively in other people's personal natal charts, um, I definitely keep an eye on my kids' natal charts, and I always think it's kind of cool because to hear their stories or to see their lives and how astrology is playing out in their lives. And oftentimes they will don't want to talk astrology with me, but it is sort of fun to just kind of be like, ooh, he doesn't realize Mercury is square in Uranus today. But anyways, let's get into the video. So some topic of things I wanted to talk about with Mercury. In a previous video, I did share how I wanted to keep my eye on Mercury just throughout the period of 2026. I think that for me personally, Mercury will be just doing interesting things. But I also just think from a global perspective, um, I think Mercury is doing things that it hasn't done in a while. Like it hasn't retrograded in water signs since 2020. This year, Mercury is going to retrograde in Pisces. Actually, I wrote down the dates. Okay, remember those dates. It's going to retrograde in Pisces from February 26th to March 20th. It's going to retrograde in Cancer from June 29th until July 23rd. And it's going to retrograde in Scorpio from October 24th till November 13th of 2026. And Mercury hasn't retrograded in a water sign since 2020. I just thought, wow, 2020. Well, what happened in 2020? COVID happened. Oh gosh, you name it. Saturn conjunct Pluto. It just was like that year alone was just a very heavy year. I was even talking with my son about it yesterday because that was the year that Kobe died, in the beginning of January or the end of January, excuse me. And I was like, wow, we haven't had Mercury go retrograde in the water signs like that for almost, or yeah, 6 years. So I just think that that should bring a very interesting energy when it comes to Mercury. Okay, why? So, what does Mercury rule in astrology? Okay, Mercury rules speech, communication, intelligence, thinking, speaking, writing, information processing, transportation. Um, it is home to the third house, which is Gemini's home, and the sixth house, which is Virgo home. And I think that, in a water sign, Mercury operates a little bit different, and it's exalted in Earth, right? It's exalted in Virgo, and it's at home in Gemini, which is an air sign. So to have Mercury retrograde in water, which is, a very, I don't want to say water. Water is I don't want to say it's a bit chaotic, but water is definitely more of a emotional space for Mercury. Um, it's more an intuitive space for Mercury where you're combining sort of the mind with the emotion, so to speak. Um, I am a personal native of Mercury in a water sign, and it has always made me feel more than more outspoken. I think or I feel through my communication. So I think that's going to be an interesting twist for Mercury this year, to retrograde through the water signs, especially since we haven't seen this type of energy in a while. Mercury retrograde can already be a very chaotic time in general for some, especially if you are a heavy Mercury native or Mercury is just doing interesting things in your own personal natal chart. So I just think, like I said in that earlier video, I'm keeping my eyes on Mercury because I think Mercury will, I may have to pop off and pop back on, but anyways, let's see how long I have. But yeah, I just think that Mercury is going to give us more of hopefully a time to really get into our feelings, to really think about a lot of things that are transpiring, not only in our personal lives, but just from a collective standpoint. Okay, tomorrow, February 6th, Mercury is going to move into the sign of Pisces, which is the sign known as Mercury's fall. Mercury has a little bit of a harder time in Pisces, but one of the things I took from that is I love that even though Mercury is going to be moving into Pisces tomorrow and, throughout um February, I think it goes into pre-shadow. Do I have the pre-shadow time? I thought I did. Yes. The pre-shadow time will be February 11th. It will move into its pre-shadow at 8 degrees of Pisces. And so we'll have a bit of time before it starts to move in that period where it wants to go back over or cover sort of this time period or the time period after the 6th of February. I think that's right, at least. Yeah, because it'll turn retrograde. It won't turn retrograde until the 26th. And it'll be at 8 degrees of Pisces, which February 6th until about February 11th, it'll move about 8 degrees and then it'll reach pre-shadow and then it'll enter into full retrograde on the 26th of February. So also, another cool thing I wrote down was on February 12th, Mercury will conjunct the North Node at 9 degrees of Pisces. And one of the things I love, even though Mercury, like I was saying earlier, originally, I'm going to try not to get too distracted, but there's so much going on outside right now in my house. But Mercury is in the sign or in the home of Jupiter. Pisces is traditionally ruled by Jupiter, and Jupiter, as we talked about earlier, is in Cancer, where in the sign of Cancer, where it is exalted. And so I'm I don't know, I have already have started sort of having a very hopeful outlook with this time of Mercury in its fall, because I think that right now this world needs hope. Okay, let's just put it that way. There's so much going on, and I don't know. I think people's lives are being just rearranged in chaotic ways. I guess we could thank Uranus partly for some of that, but just redirected, displaced, a lot of, yeah, just hard things to watch, especially if you do follow media and, or just your local area, of hearing about different changes. And I know I got an email the other day that talked about why, some of the kids at my kids' school couldn't just walk out and do these kind of like walkout protests that's going on in some of the schools. And I had no idea that that was one of the things that, was going on in my local area. But apparently it's a thing. There's been just, my kids are in high school. So high school age kids really wanting to protest and, make their voices or maybe even just their act known to stand against what they don't support. And obviously kids see what is affecting, the country, the world on a global level, on a national level, and, they have a say as well. So I just thought, wow, that's just so striking. But I think with Mercury going into Pisces tomorrow, it really does change that focus. I know just for myself, more towards just kind of looking more towards a hopeful place or getting in a hopeful place and um, thinking about ways where I can incorporate more spirituality and a positive outlook on things, um, regardless of what I may see in my local area or that I may see in the media that causes my, your mental framework just to go elsewhere. Um, so yeah, so that's what's going on with Mercury. Let's see, was there anything? Mercury is in its evening star position right now. And I was reading and researching, and some sources were saying that it will be a great time to view Mercury, kind of like with the naked eye, where you go out and you actually see the planet of Mercury in the sky, which I always think is so cool. Next Wednesday, which, what do you know, is a Mercury day, after sunset, is the time where you will see Mercury at its brightest as an evening star. So I thought that was really cool to note as well. I think that is pretty much all I wanted to share about the planet of Mercury. I didn't want to make this video super long. I really just wanted to post as much as I could about current astrology and um, the way that I'm kind of working with this energy. Oh, so my little personal story, my literal astrology story, I guess I should say. So Mercury squaring Uranus, which is a transit that usually lasts for, I don't know, approximately 3 days, maybe a little more. It's definitely still squaring Uranus today. And then tomorrow, as I stated, it will move into Pisces, where it's moving further away from the planet or the sign of Uranus, the planet of Uranus in Taurus. So Mercury in Pisces moving away from Uranus in Taurus. So yesterday, okay, I was out running errands like I usually do. And I run a lot of errands. I have Jupiter in the third house, so I'm constantly going. But I was out and I was running errands, and my flat tire light came on. And as you know, I just mentioned that Mercury rules transportation, or is one of the things it can pertain to, and especially, well, I'll get there. But I was out, I was running some errands, and my flat tire light just comes on out of nowhere. Now, usually, or not flat tire, my tire pressure light came on out of nowhere. Usually I'm thinking, all right, well, we've had some pretty cold weather lately. Maybe it's, due to that. And usually you take your car in and they check the tires and, so on and so forth. They, balance out the air, add a little bit more air due to the fact that there has been some changes in the weather, and they send you on your merry way. So I was out running errands, and I was sort of on I was like riding basically, I wasn't on the freeway, but I was on like the side road by the freeway. Texas has a lot of roads situations like that. So I was riding and I was like, oh, wow, my tire pressure light is coming on. But I was like, I mean, we haven't had the snowy weather or cold weather or windy weather or whatever for a few days. Why would it just come on out of the blue, right? Thinking in my mind, right? So right as it comes on, probably about, I don't know, less than a mile down the street, I see a place to get your tires checked. And I'm thinking, oh, well, that's great. Like, just, very soon after the tire pressure light had come on, and I was just thinking to myself, like, well, it must be my lucky day, right? Like, I mean, what else? I mean, I would hate to think now, with looking back, that if I had to go further to find somewhere to have my tires checked, what would have happened. But I get there, the technician looks at my tires, and, he was like, yeah, I think it's fine. I'm thinking probably with the cold weather last week, that we had, it could have thrown off your tire pressure or whatever. So I just, I readjusted it, or I leveled it out, or balanced out your air. So you should be fine, right? So I get to where I'm going, which was not that far away from where I was. And when I got there, I went in the place for probably about, I don't know, definitely less than an hour. And I come back out to get in my car, turn my car on, get back out on the road, not even a minute on the road. And what do you think happens? Yes, my tire pressure light comes back on. And I'm like, there's no way this has anything to do with the weather, And so then I start to get a little, I don't know, I don't want to say frustrated, but just worried. I started to get worried because I was like, I think I'm going to have a flat tire here soon, because, it just, that, that was really fast for me to have it come back on after I just got air put in my tires, and I was so scared that I was going to have a flat. And to me, that's one of those things where if I can avoid it, I would love to avoid it. I think it's the worst thing to happen, is to get a flat tire when you're out somewhere, especially in areas where you don't really know that much about the area. I didn't really know that much about this area, or just in general. Like, I do not like to get flat tires. I don't know how to change flat tires. You usually have to call somebody out, and you have to wait. And anyhow, it becomes such an inconvenience. You're hoping you're not on a freeway when all of this is playing out, right? So I was like, okay, shoot, what do I do? Because I don't know what to do now, right? I'm in an area I don't really know that well. My tire pressure light comes back on, which is alerting me that it's more than just the weather here, okay? And I'm probably having a flat tire if I don't get somewhere fast. So again, out of sheer luck, I call it, I feel like it was luck, I'm passing this place, and it's kind of like a one of those family owned, like, businesses or whatever, where you go in and they look at your tire. Or actually, was it a tire place? I think it did say, yeah, that's what got me to stop, because it did say um something about tires. And I don't know all of what it said about tires, but the fact that it said tires and they had tires was enough to make me stop. So I stop at this place, and I'm going to give you just a small snapshot of me talking to the technician, because in my mind, I'm always thinking, okay, it's sort of a Uranus and Taurus thing, right? I'm like, how much am I going to be out of, right? Or I have Jupiter in Taurus, but of course Uranus is in Taurus right now, which maybe that's where that look comes from. I don't know. But I'm like, how much am I going to be out of right now, right? And so, like, if you know anything about Taurus energy, it wants to be resourceful. It wants to not just go and, splurge all the dough. Like, it wants to think about, what's an economical way to do this. And so I'm at this place, and I'm thinking, well, I'll just see if they can at least put on my spare if the tire is indeed going flat, until I can get to the dealership and, these factory tires, I've had this happen before. They cost a whole lot of money. Like my mind, I'm just going and going and going. So I pull up and the guy is just like, I'm like, can you just check my tire? I just had the my tire pressure light come back on within an hour from me getting air put in the tire, and they told me it was fine and that it just was the tire pressure. And the guy looks at me, the technician looks at me, and he was like, ma'am, this tire is flat, pretty much, is what he told me. And I was like, well, is there any way could you guys just maybe put on my spare tire and, what have you, and I'll get it to the dealership. And he was like, or you could just fix it. And I was like, what do you mean by that? He was like, you don't want to just fix it? And I was like, well, how do you fix it? And so he was like, why don't you park your car, go in, have them I'll see if we have space for them to put you on the list, yada, yada, yada. So I do that. They had space. They got me in. And my natal Jupiter is conjuncting Uranus right now. So I just thought that was, kind of like, I don't know, the what is it? The good luck charm or something like that, the lucky um the four-leaf clover, in this whole time that I wasn't seeing. And then when I processed later, I was like, wow, I was driving on a flat tire. But anyways, so um they got me in and they were just like, it's, the guy was explaining to me, it would cost you about the same amount it would if we just put on your spare tire to just fix your tire, because your tire is flat, or we consider this a flat tire. And so we fix it. And then he gives me the proper way to fix a flat tire, which the last time I had this happen, which a nail had gone into the tire and I was losing air, and I took my vehicle back to the dealership because I still have on, dealership tires. They were like, oh God, this is going to run you all this money. And I was so, in my mind, of course, I'm thinking like, I got to do it again. Like, here we go. Like, another $400, $300, $400 down the drain on a stupid screw in my tire. And so the guy was like, no, like when you get a flat tire, like there's a whole other way you fix it. And this is a flat tire. And so I was like, yeah, well, can we just do that? Can we just fix it? And he told me the price that it would cost to fix it, which was way less than what it would cost to just get another one of these brand new factory tires put on the car. And he was like, yeah, he was like, it's just one screw. I mean, your tires are still good, and, they still are in good shape and everything. We just need to fix the place where the screw was. So to make, I know, this super long story short, in this literal astrology moment for me yesterday with Mercury squaring Uranus, Mercury ruling transportation, Uranus and Taurus, ruling, the tangible resources that we have, right? I just was like, wow, like this is so phenomenal that, all of this was able to happen. Now my tire is no longer flat. And where this is all happening at in my natal chart just totally made sense, guys. It really made sense. And so again, I will say it and I will keep saying it. I know this video is getting super long, that astrology really works. I love astrology. It keeps you grounded. It keeps you, I don't know, for me, it helps me to understand and see the reason behind things, no matter what's going on. And I think for me, like, that's so important to be able to say, okay, I see this. I understand why this is happening. That makes total sense. Yeah, let's do that. Or let me go somewhere and think about this or whatever. But and process this more. It really does, it really does help a lot. And so that's my literal astrology story. Hopefully I will be back on here again. I wanted to talk about the next um, thing with Uranus. Although I may not make a video, I was going to make a video with Uranus and Venus. Uranus and Venus are going to square here, I think, tomorrow, maybe. And there's some things that's going on, but I probably won't make a video on that. I probably will save it. And if something notable pops up, I will come back on and do more sharing. All right. Thank you for listening and watching, and hopefully you derived something good from this video, or maybe you just understand a little bit more about Mercury and how it works in astrology. So have a wonderful rest of your day, and peace and love.